So this whole thing of creating by naming. Thus the poet creates or recreates within his artistic world via the utterance and profusion of names and nouns, a kind of an innate Baroque quality. This tradition then becomes a part of the celebration of the métissage of the Americas, a fertile, erotic, often violent, but always exuberant process of transcultural layering. It is a stylistic process in which the repetición de volutes, de arabescos, y de máscaras that Severo Sarduy mentions in his essay El Barroco y el Neo-Baroque is integrated into a content structure in which el barroco es, ante todo, como es sabido, libertad, confianza en una cultura de preferencia desordenada. El barroco es en tanto que inmersión en el panteísmo. And that's from Sarduy. The fascination with the tropical fecundity and human variety of the islands, expressed in full written form through a mixture of the avant-garde social commitment, verbal pyrotechnics, and neo-Baroque imagery by Aimé Césaire in his famous long poem, Quijada d'un retour au pays natal in 1939, has coalesced into a canonic form that numbers of poets and some very poeticized novelists have worked with, each in his own or her own refinement of its style and content over the past 80 years. So I would say that Aimé Césaire's Cahiers d'un retour au pays natal, published in 1939, is absolutely fundamental in establishing that tradition. Césaire's poem, which was accompanied by an introduction by André Breton in a reprint in 1943, in which he spoke of La parole d'Aimé Césaire, belle comme l'oxygène naissant, partially grew out of surrealism, but immediately also transcended it in its search for its own uniquely Caribbean voice to speak of its quintessential experience. Already in Cahiers d'un retour au pays natal, geography is blended with the body, a technique that Anthony Phelps was to use in his extended metaphor of woman and homeland in Orchidée Noire years later. Sounds and sonic devices with words, prose with poetry, African rhythms with erudite vocabulary, a profusion of words that speaks of the superabundance of sensory experience, and the anguish of history. Toussaint l'ouverture, in capital letters, from Cahiers, with the call for action to end oppression and social inequality. The Churrigueresque cathedral is the world itself, both in its natural and human aspects. The intricacy of adornment and subtlety of balance of Baroque sculpture are now inherent in physical reality. The permutación, espejeo, fusión, intercambio entre los elementos, choque y condensación of Sarduy are now part of the human experience itself. In other words, Sarduy several times speaks also about the kind of inherent artificiality, even of the Neo-Baroque, but in the French Caribbean Baroque, the world is Baroque by its very nature. The Baroque aesthetics has thus been transplanted and recreated in the Americas as in a wholly new context that has paralleled the Neo-Baroque aesthetic that was simultaneously evolving in the writing of Spanish-speaking Caribbean authors such as Miguel Ángel Asturias and Alejo Carpentier, with which there was growing mutual influence. The continuation of the Neo-Baroque in both content and style within the French Caribbean literature, especially in Haiti and Martinique, has become a basic stream of its development. In Canada, it has been elaborated and transmitted by immigrant Haitian writers, and it's continued on in the second generation of Haitian authors who only spent their early childhood in Haiti before moving to Quebec. I think Joël de Rosiers was 10 when he came from Haiti. Joël de Rosiers is one of the principal voices of this generation, particularly in poetry. His background is profoundly cosmopolitan. Born in Caille, Haiti in 1951, he moved to Canada, where he finished his undergraduate studies. Afterward, he studied in Strasbourg, in France, where he earned a degree in psychiatry. And he's a practicing psychiatrist. He has traveled extensively in Europe, North Africa, the Caribbean, and Latin America, including a long trip through the Sahel, which he describes at the end of his book of poems and prose, Tribut. Other early works include the books of poems Metropolis Opera, 1987, and Savane, 1993, as well as a collection of essays, Théorie Caraïbes, Poétique du Déracinement. His two latest volumes of poems, Vétiver, 1999, and Caille, 2007, have had an autobiographical element, or at least a subject, that seems to be closely identified with the author himself. It's still fiction, of course, which has added a narrative aspect that unites the texts. Art, music, and architecture are important interests for de Rosiers and play a strong imagistic part in his work, so that scenes take on a Baroque interplay of sensual elements. The fragmented style, abstraction, and urban content of his early work smoothed itself out in Savane and has become more approachable in his later work. However, the Neo-Baroque was apparent right from the start in the richness of detail, the nonlinear development of accretion, juxtaposition, and contrast, the profusion of images, the extreme breadth of vocabulary, which often contains recondite, even medical terminology, much like the cultismos of the Spanish Baroque poets, the blending of bodily, geographical, and topographical metaphors, and even in the elegant but often rearranged syntax facilitated by the complete absence of punctuation. I've never seen a poem in all of his books with a comma or a period, which often plays with hyperbaton, another favorite element of poets such as Góngora and Quevedo, as in the following unnamed poem from Savane. Pieds léchés de Sargasse, contre les filles à pubis écru, m'ébattis, le chant du jungle des pétrels, qui sur l'abîme s'épouse, dans la splendeur descend le solstice, sur le visage des femmes, violent contre le poème, moi, buriner le livre de l'amour mort, ô vulve cruauté du sein, nous regretterons. You can see the rearrangement here, and I translated some of the poems of Savane for a literary review, and it took me a long time. Vetiver, the title of which alludes to the aromatic medicinal grass originally from southern India but transplanted to the Caribbean,